Good evening everyone. So in today's video we are going to learn about United Nations and its main principal organs. So basically, as we all know, United Nations is the successor of League of Nations. Now, primarily because the League of Nations was unable to prevent World War II, United Nations was established. Now there is a certain background which we would like to discuss before we discuss the organs of United Nations. Now, in 1942, President Roosevelt, Churchill, Litvinov, and TV Song of US, Russia, China, and UK met and signed a short document which came to be known as the United Nations Declaration. And the next day, representatives of 22 other nations added their signatures. So basically, it was decided that a new organization shall take over League of Nations and it would be called the United Nations. Now after that, in September 1944, a conference was held which came to be known as the Dumbarton Oaks Conference. Now this is the conference which was 2 months held from September 1944 to October 1944, and it is here where most of the negotiations and formulations with regard to the United Nations happened. Now there was one main aim of the United Nations, and that was prevent future wars and succeed in the ineffective League of Nations. Now after a year, in San Francisco conference, 50 governments met and signed the UN Charter. Now the charter was signed on 26th June, and hence 26th June is celebrated as the UN Charter Day. And the document, that is the UN Charter, came into effect on 24th October 1945, and that day is known as the United Nations Day, when actually the United Nations began operations. The headquarters of the UN is in UN Plaza, New York City, and the official languages include Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. Now, as we know, United Nations has 6 principal organs. That is, firstly, the General Assembly, International Court of Justice, Trusteeship Council, United Nations Security Council, United Nations Economic and Social Council, and the United Nations Secretariat. Now, we'll be discussing all the organs in today's video. Now, as we know, the most important document is the United Nations Charter, and it is through this UN Charter that all these organs are actually regulated. Now, according to Article 1 of the UN Charter, the purpose of the United Nations are: first, to maintain peace and security; second, develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for principle of equal rights, self-determination of people, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace; third, to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character; and fourthly, to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of these common ends. So basically, you can see the aim of the United Nations is not only to maintain peace and security, but to develop friendly relations along with international cooperation. Now, the organization and its members, along with the aims pursued in Article 1, have to act with principles in accordance with Article 2. For better understanding, I would request you to go and look at Article 2, and all the principles over there are listed according to which the United Nations has to function. Now, with regard to the membership of the United Nations, Article 4 states that it is open to all states which accept the obligations contained in the UN Charter and are willing to carry out these obligations. And the admission of any such state to the United Nations will be affected by a decision of the General Assembly upon a recommendation by the Security Council. Now, whenever a particular state has to be expelled from the Organization of United Nations, then also the same procedure will be followed, but under Article 6. That is, a recommendation of that is, the decision has to be of the General Assembly, but only after a recommendation has been made by the Security Council. Now let us first study about the General Assembly, which is the first organ of the United Nations. Now, United Nations General Assembly was established in the same year 1945, and the first session was held in Central Hall, London. I am sorry for this mistake, I'll rectify it. It's a year of establishment. So as we know, it was established in the year 1945 and is headquartered at New York. Now, United Nations General Assembly basically constitutes of all the states. All the states, that is the currently 193 members who are part of the United Nations, are automatically part of the General Assembly. Now, before discussing further, I would like to mention that almost all headquarters of the principal organs of United Nations are situated in New York, except the International Court of Justice, which we have already discussed in length in another video. Now, there are just two observer states, that is Palestine and Holy See. First president was Paul Henry Spaak of Belgium, and the first women and only president belonging to India has been Vijay Lakshmi Pandit in 1953. Another important fact is that the first Asian president of General Assembly was Carlos Romulo. Now, functions of General Assembly are basically they can discuss on any questions on matters within the scope of the present charter. They can consider general principles of cooperation and maintenance of peace and security. They shall initiate studies and maintain recommendation for promotion of international cooperation. They shall receive annual and special reports from the Security Council and other organs of UN, and they shall consider and approve the budget of the organization, including specialized agencies. Now, I'll be discussing about specialized agencies in length later in the video. Now, all these functions are given in Chapter 4 of the UN Charter. Now, there are certain committees of the General Assembly. Now, most of the time it happens that when you go for Model United Nations or when you study report of General Assemblies, you will see that all these reports are made by certain committees of which work directly under the General Assembly. And these committees are divided into 6 parts. That is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth committee. Now, as you can see, the first committee is the Disarmament and International Security Committee, also known as the DISEC, and concerned with disarmament and related international security questions. The second committee is the Economic and Financial, that is the ECOFIN, and is considered with economic questions. The third is the Social, Cultural and Humanitarian, and also known as SOCIUM, and deals with the social and humanitarian issues. The fourth committee is the Special, Political and Decolonization, and also deals with a variety of political subjects which are not dealt by the first committee. And fifth committee is Administrative, Budgetary and General, which deals with administration and budget of the United Nations. And the sixth and the last committee is the Legal Committee, which specifically deals with the legal matters. Now, you must have heard of Legal Committee several times. Even the International Law Commission works under the Legal Committee of the United Nations General Assembly. The second organ is the United Nations Security Council. Now, UNSC is again one of the most important organs of the United Nations. Now, the United Nations Security Council was established in the year 1945 and has the same headquarters, that is the New York City. The first session was held on 17 January 1946 at Church House, Westminster. Now, the composition is basically that there are 5 permanent members and there are 10 non-permanent members. Now, non-permanent members have a tenure of 2 years. So currently you can see the list of the states are the non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, and then there are 5 permanent members as mentioned in Article 23 of the UN Charter, that is China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, United States. The President of the Security Council basically involves setting of the agenda, presiding at its meeting and overseeing any crisis. It is held by each of the members in turn for 1 month and according to alphabetical order of the member state's name. So basically the alphabetical order of the states would be taken into consideration, and every month there would be another president of the Security Council. Now, according to Article 4, there are basically 3 powers of Security Council. First, maintenance of international peace and security. Second, act in accordance with principles and purposes of United Nations. And thirdly, the Security Council shall submit annual and when necessary special reports to the General Assembly for its consideration. Now, Article 25 is one of the most important articles of UN Charter with regard to the United Nations Security Council. Now, Article 25 states that all members of the United Nations agreed to accept and carry out the decision of Security Council in accordance with the present charter. Now, in our previous videos you have seen that we have mentioned Article 25 several times. Basically, for the purpose of getting a particular state to follow certain obligation, we use this Article 25. Now, I will like to use an example over here. Basically, whenever there is an SC resolution which is passed, especially in recent cases, if we see with regard to International Criminal Court, if there is a certain country which is not accepting an order or jurisdiction of the court, but if there is an SC resolution or recommendation to that effect, then we can say that that particular state is bound by that obligation which it has not adhered to, but because it has been signed and sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council, it has to be obligated under Article 25 to follow that decision. I will repeat. Article 25 states all members of United Nations agree to accept and carry out the decision of the Security Council. So basically, anything which SC wants to execute, it can execute via Article 25 of the UN Charter. Now, another important article with regard to the UN Charter with regard to Security Council is Article 27. Now, most of us have heard of the veto power, but we cannot ignore the fact that the word veto power is not used in the word veto power is actually not used in the UN Charter. Now, basically, these 3 are this I have actually added over here for a pointer for us to remember well. But we have to see that these 3 points are basically covered in Article 27, which state that each member of a Security Council shall have 1 vote. Decision of Security Council on procedural matters shall be made by an affirmative vote of 9 members, basically which is 3/4 of the majority. Decision of the Security Council on other matters means other apart from procedural matters, shall be made by an affirmative vote of 9 members, including the concurring vote of the permanent members, provided that in decision under Chapter 6 and under Para 3 of Article 52, a party to the dispute shall abstain from voting. Now, this basically means that whenever there is any permanent member, then that permanent member, if it can restrict itself from voting in a particular resolution, and this is known as the negative veto. Basically, when there is a certain kind of proposal which needs to be adopted, and if everyone has accepted, but one certain permanent member does not have a concurring vote, then that resolution will not be accepted or will not be further executed. Now, we need to consider that United Nations is mostly criticized because of this veto power, that the veto power shall be used by the states in their favor, and we cannot ignore the fact that veto power is only with the United Nations Security Council permanent members, and hence the criticism which it faces is that these permanent members will always be using this veto power for their benefit. Now, Article 29 of the UN Charter provides that Security Council can, in order to perform its functions, establish subsidiary bodies. On one hand, they include bodies such as the Security Council Committee on Admission of New Members. On the other hand, most of the criminal tribunals that we know are established by the UN, are established by Article 29 of the UN Charter. Now, there is certain, we'll just insert this here. Yeah. Now, we need to understand that these organizations are established via resolutions under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. But the power given to Security Council by which these organizations can be established is given under Article 29 of the UN Charter. Now, so now we come to United Nations Secretariat. Now, United Nations Secretariat, just a second. Secretariat is actually the executive arm of the United Nations. It has an important role in setting the agenda for deliberative and decision-making bodies of the United Nations. The General Assembly, ECOSOC and Security Council, basically, and the implementation of the decision of these bodies. Now, Secretary General is appointed by the General Assembly, and it is the head of the Secretariat, and is also considered as the head of the United Nations organization. The current Secretary General is Antonio Guterres, and he is the only Secretary General who was a former head of state of Poland, that is, he was the Prime Minister of Poland and is currently the 9th Secretary General. The first Secretary General was Trygve Lie. The current Deputy Secretary General is Amina J. Mohammed from Nigeria, and the first Deputy Secretary General was Louis Frichet from Canada. The composition of the Secretary General is basically the staff as the organization may require. It shall be appointed by General Assembly upon recommendation by the Security Council. SecGen shall be the chief administrative officer of the organization. He shall act in the same capacity in all the meetings of different organizations, different principal organs of the UN. Missions of the Secretariat are basically to make an annual report to the General Assembly on the work of the organization, as given in Article 98, and may bring to attention of the Security Council any matter which, in his opinion, which may threaten the maintenance of international peace and security. Now, this is given in Article 99 of the UN Charter. Now, Article 100 is very important because it states that the UN Secretariat shall be an independent body. Now, they shall not receive instructions from any government or any authority external to the organization, refrain from any action which might reflect on their position as international responsible. They shall refrain from any action which They shall refrain from any action which might reflect on their position as international officials responsible only to the organization, and each member shall undertake to respect the exclusive international character of the responsibility of the Secretary General and the staff, and not to seek to influence them in discharge of their responsibilities. So it is very important for us to understand that the independence of the Secretariat is of primary importance and is given in Article 100 of the United Nations Charter. Now, the other principal organ is the Economic and Social Council. Now, Economic and Social Council is given in Article 61 of the UN Charter. It shall consist of 54 members elected by the General Assembly. 18 members shall be elected each year for a term of 3 years, and each member of the Economic and Social Council shall have one representative. Now, the primary functions of ECOSOC are given in Article 62, which are to initiate studies, reports with respect to international economic, social, cultural, health related matters, and give recommendations to General Assembly and to the specialized agencies concerned. Secondly, to make recommendations for the purpose of promoting respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedom for all. Third, to prepare draft convention for submission to the General Assembly with respect to matters falling within its competence. And fourthly, to call for international conferences on matters falling within its competence. The President of the Economic and Social Council is the presiding officer of the body, and the first president was Arkot Ramaswamy Madalya, and he belonged to India. Now, basically, there are 6 principal organs of the United Nations. Firstly, Secretary Council, secondly, General Assembly, thirdly, the Secretariat, and fourthly, the Economic and Social Council. All these 4 organs we have discussed. The 5th organ, that is the International Court of Justice, is discussed in detail in another video, link of which I'll be giving in the description. The 6th organ is basically the Trusteeship Council, which basically stopped its operation in the year 1994 and is now only active on paper in today's date. Apart from these principal organs, there are certain specialized agencies of the United Nations. Now, Article 57 of the UN Charter establishes these special agencies. Now, these agencies are established by intergovernmental agreement and have wide international responsibilities as defined in their basic instruments. They can be even fields related to economic, social, cultural, educational, health, and they shall be brought into relationship with the United Nations in accordance with the provisions of Article 63. Now, such agencies thus brought in relationship with the United Nations are herein referred to as specialized agencies. So most of the times we hear that this particular organization is a specialized agency of the United Nations. Now, these agencies are established under Article 57 of the UN Charter. Now, in this video, I am sure you were able to understand the basic primary functions of the United Nations and its organs. And along with understanding the UN organs, we have also been able to discuss the UN Charter from the starting to the very end. At least we have been able to discuss the main articles. I would like you to please tell me in the comment section that how you like this video, and do tell us what all more videos do you want us to make. You can follow us on all social media links, and also give us a mail at intlexia@gmail.com. Looking forward. Thank you so much.